Hey guys, and welcome to Monopoly. So most of you guys may have been exposed to monopolies at an early age due to the world famous board game Monopoly. But I'm here to give you guys a more total and complete understanding of monopolies from a microeconomics perspective. So Merriam-Webster defines monopoly as a firm who has complete control of the entire supply of goods or of a service in a certain area or market. Now while that's a great definition of what a monopoly is, from a microeconomics perspective there's a much more simpler way to define monopolies. A monopoly is a firm who has market power. Since market power is the most essential aspect of a monopoly, we should therefore take a look at what is the source of that market power. Different sources of market powers arise from different entities. A patent is a great source of market power which is given to the monopoly by the government. Another source of market power are economies of scale. Economies of scale create circumstances where one large firm or a handful of large firms can produce at a lower cost than many small firms, thus creating a natural monopoly. Having exclusive access to an important input is also a great way to create a natural monopoly. Great examples of this are the oil and diamond industry, where most of the important input is found only in concentrated areas around the world. Technological innovations are a great source of market power as well. Big tech companies such as Apple have created such innovative products that have resulted in most of the market power transferring into their hands. Now that we know what the sources of market power are, it's time to look at the graph of a monopoly. Let's take a look at the graph on the screen. On the x-axis we have the Q for the quantity, and on the y-axis we have P for the price. The first curve we have on the graph is the marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve slopes upward due to the law of diminishing returns. Next, you can see that we have added two new curves. One curve is the demand curve, which is downward sloping as usual, and the second curve is the marginal revenue curve. To understand why the marginal revenue curve is under and different from the demand curve, we will look at an example. Suppose you have a monopoly that decides to sell 2 units for $5 each. Now in order to sell the third unit, the monopoly must lower the price. Suppose the monopoly lowers the price to $4 per unit to be able to sell the third unit. Now let's calculate the total revenue if that were to happen. 3 units at $4 each gives you a total revenue of $12. Now the next step is to calculate the marginal revenue. The initial 2 units for $5 each gives you a total revenue of $10, and the one we just calculated, 3 units at $4, gives you a total revenue of $12. Comparing those two gives you the marginal revenue of $2. But in order to sell 3 units, we sold them at a price of $4 each, and the marginal revenue is only $2. Therefore, the marginal revenue is less than the price, and the price is synonymous to the demand. The profit maximization point for a monopoly is where the MR equals MC. As you can see, I have taken the liberty of labeling the point where MR equals MC. At that point, if you simply go down to the x-axis, you can see where the profit maximization quantity is. And if you follow that point all the way up to the demand curve and across to the y-axis, you can see where the profit maximization price would be. Now I have added the average total cost curve. The average total cost multiplied by the quantity will allow us to determine the cost. Remembering that profit equals total revenue minus cost, this graph will allow us to determine the profit. Multiplying the average total cost by the quantity will give you the cost at the profit maximization point. Multiplying the demand, which is the price, by the quantity will give you the profit maximization total revenue. Subtracting the average total cost, which is the lower box, from the total revenue, which is the big overall box, will give you the profit, which is highlighted in pink. This neat trick allows you to see the usefulness of graphs in determining profits of monopolies. Since monopolies have most of the market power, they are known for setting extremely high prices. One way that these high prices are attempted to be regulated are by the government setting price controls. I will now show how a government imposing a price control will actually lead to a greater quantity being produced by the monopoly. The graph in front of you represents a normal monopoly with the same curves from the previous slide. The new red line on this graph represents the regulated price imposed on the monopoly by the government. Notice that the regulated price is much lower than the price of profit maximization for the monopoly. This new red line also represents the marginal revenue. The reason why this red line represents the marginal revenue is that if the government imposes a regulated price, then for each quantity sold, the quantity will be sold at that regulated price. Therefore, the marginal revenue for each additional product will beat that regulated price that is set by the government. Therefore, the regulated price, which is a straight line, also represents the marginal revenue. Once the marginal revenue curve touches the demand curve, in order to sell an additional unit, the monopoly must lower its price, therefore causing the marginal revenue curve to jump back down to its original one, going negative. This concept is illustrated by the marginal revenue line, the red one, jumping straight back down to the old black marginal revenue line. As you can see, once the red marginal revenue line is jumping straight back down, it also crosses the marginal cost line. And if you can remember, the point where the MR equals MC, the point where the marginal revenue graph crosses the marginal cost curve, is the profit maximization point. And the quantity produced by the monopoly is the quantity where it profit maximizes, which is also represented on this graph by the red Q with the lower subscript R. As you can see, this QR is a greater quantity than QM. Therefore, we have proven that at a regulated price, a monopoly actually sells more than it does at its own profit maximizing quantity. Perhaps the most difficult concept for most people to grasp is why the new red marginal revenue curve, after it crosses the demand curve, shoots straight back down to the old marginal revenue curve. This concept is easily explained by the fact that once the marginal revenue, which is the price, crosses the demand curve, the price will be greater than the demand. Therefore, in order to continue selling this product, the monopoly must lower its price. And once it lowers its price, its marginal revenue returns back to the original marginal revenue, which was a downward sloping curve. Well, that concludes the video I have for you guys today. I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed it. Thank you so much.